I'd like to welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 8th, 2021 Board of Adjustment meeting. My name is Mike G., Vice Chairman of the Board of Adjustments. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, this meeting is being held via Zoom platform. Please note this meeting is being recorded. If anyone is having technical or connection difficulties, please contact Jamie Lawson at 336-380-7064 for support. For today's public comments to address the board in this meeting, please indicate that you wish to do so by using the raise hand feature in Zoom, or by phone, press *9 and our meeting host will notify me that you wish to speak. Anyone who speaks before the board for the record must give their name and address and swear or affirm that you will tell the truth. I'd like to confirm that all board members and staff members are present and can hear me. Members present, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Robert Giles. Bob, looks like you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Affirmative.
Eric Grant.
Present.
Bob Lewis.
Here.
And myself. So that is 4. So we do have enough to proceed today. I will address the applicants when they come before us with clarification that there are only 4 board members today. Staff participants, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Planning Manager Conrad Almeida.
Here.
Principal Planner Jamie Lawson.
Here.
Chief Code Enforcement Officer Chris Marland. Chris, I think you're on mute too.
Here.
Code Enforcement Officer Jeff McClintock.
Here.
Thank you very much.
Vice Chairman Gee, also Todd Lambert, Engineering Director, is also on the call.
Okay, and Todd Lambert.
Here.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Adjustment to order. For those of you who have not been with us before, the Board of Adjustment is appointed by the City Council. The extraterritorial members are appointed by County Commissioners. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, so we'd ask that anyone who speaks before us state their name, swear or affirm that everything they say is the truth to the best of their knowledge, and appeals from the decision of this board may be taken to Superior Court. Our first procedure is to ask the city to state their position on the case because of their knowledge of the case and technical codes. We would then ask the appellant or the applicant to state their case. And thirdly, because this is a public hearing, we would ask anyone from the public to state their opinion or give testimony. At that time, the board will then discuss the evidence, take a vote. An affirmative 4/5 vote is required in order to grant a variance. A majority vote is required to approve a special use permit. I will note again that we have 4 members with us today, and so any cases heard before us today will require a unanimous decision. There are 2 cases for consideration this morning. Mr. Almeida, have the cases before us been properly advertised?
Yes.
Have all adjoining property owners been notified?
Yes.
All right. Our first order will be to approve the May 11th, 2021 meeting minutes. Did everyone receive a copy of the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any changes or recommendations after reviewing those? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Grant has moved to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Mr. Giles has seconded. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. Okay. The first case before us this morning is item number 3. The applicant is Mr. Daniel Hernandez for property located at 478 Sapphire Road, Alamance County, requesting a variance for the maximum fence and wall height. Is someone here today representing Mr. Hernandez?
Yes. Yes, Vice Chairman. There is the applicant themselves are present, as well as their legal representation.
Okay. And I see Mr. Hernandez's hand up as well. Okay, and So, Mr. Almeida, are you going to present the case for the city?
Sure. Yes, sir. I
So
will
I
be
would
able
ask
to.
that you would just state your name, swear and affirm that everything you say will be the truth to the best of your knowledge.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Conrad Almeida, Planning Manager for the City of Burlington. And I swear that everything I say to the best of my knowledge will be the truth. If I can share my screen here, let's see. This property is, can you all see the screen here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This property is on the corner of Sapphire Road. The property in question is addressed at 478 Sapphire Road, parcel ID 175671. The
Mr.
request,
Almeida, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Can I,
sir.
can I ask you to stop for 1 second? Mr. Hernandez, I'm going to address you directly, if that's okay. We, as a board, only have 4 members present today. This is obviously a very important request for you. In a standard meeting, when we have a full board of 5 members, only a 4/5 majority is required to approve a variance request. Because there's only 4 members here today, your request would have to be approved unanimously. So I guess my question to you is, given that knowledge, do you wish to continue this morning?
At this point, I would say yes. Kind of being put on the spot and not being able to ask my attorney. I would also seek advice on that as well.
Okay, Mrs. Lawson, I think I saw where his attorney was maybe in the waiting room. Can we allow them a second to discuss their desire as far as going forward?
Sure. Which is your attorney, sir?
Randy Herman.
Okay, I'm going to promote him also to panelist. And is that your wife, Amanda Hernandez?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I'll also promote her as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Herman, this is Mike G. Did you hear the question that I posed to the applicant?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, they had me muted. Yes. So I heard the question. I would just say it's up to Mr. Hernandez if he wants to continue. Obviously, if we had 5 members, we could have 1 dissenting vote and still have it pass. With only 4 members, it'll require a unanimous vote. You know, if we continue it, it'll just go to the next month. It'll be decided then. Mr. Hernandez, no, construction would be able to go forward with it until it gets approved. So it's up to you if you want to wait until next month to have a full board hear it, or if you want to go forward today and get a decision.
How likely would it be that we're here again next month and there's only 4 members again?
I can't answer that question, Mr. Hernandez.
How common is it that you only have 4 members in attendance? For instance, did this happen last month?
It did not happen last month.
At this point, I think we should just continue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Almeida, I'm sorry for interrupting you there. If you could, again, just start and let us know the city's, present this case for the city.
Sure. Thank you. So to pick up from where I left off, the property is addressed at 478 Sapphire Road, parcel ID 175671. And the request is to allow a 5-foot high fence to be placed within the 10-foot required setback as established by the McIntosh on the Lake conditional zoning requirements, as well as section 3.12.b, note 11 of the mixed use district dimensional standards. At this point, staff's position is to uphold the city's ordinance and to require the fence be placed outside of the 10-foot required setback. I'm available for any questions the board may have.
Okay, so just to clarify, the request would be to allow the maximum height to be 5 feet instead of 4 feet. Is that what the variance request is?
The variance request is to place the 5-foot high fence within this 10-foot required setback. There is also an additional consideration that this is also the utility easement. And so if the fence were lowered to a 4-foot height, then the utility easement issue would be another circumstance that we have. And city staff is not supportive of placing any fence within this 10-foot utility easement. And you can see that here on this this plat that was part of the application submittal. You can see the dashed line kind of running parallel to the property line that's abutting Spalding Street, that then curves around and continues down Sapphire Road. And this 10-foot UE stands for the 10-foot utility easement. So the fence is currently proposed to be within this 10-foot utility easement. This 20-foot wide storm drainage easement, with consultation with city staff, the idea would be that this drive gate could be located, repositioned here to allow the gate to be opened, whatnot, to allow access to the storm drainage pipe that's located within this easement. And staff would be supportive of having the fence run along this easement and run through the storm drainage easement, but staff is not supportive of the fence, regardless of the height, to be located within this 10-foot utility easement.
So just help me clarify again.
Mhm.
I'm a little slow.
Sure.
So we would have to approve two separate things. The height of the fence being greater than 4 feet and it being allowed to be within the utility easement.
I think the motion would be to go down that road. Yes, sir. If you were to make a motion to approve this request, I would also want to call upon Todd Lambert, our city engineer, to comment, because there are some other considerations of the fence's placement within that easement.
Okay, I got you. And we can certainly have him do that. I just want to make sure that I understand what the request is and where we are being outside of the ordinance. And I guess those two things would be the height of the fence and then the location of the fence.
That would be correct. So in our fence regulations, this is the UDO section where it talks about the height, the fourth one. Then there's also this section here where this D2A, in cases where a fence or a wall is proposed within an easement, the applicant shall provide evidence of the easement owner's consent regarding placement of the fence or wall. And that utility easement, with direction from city engineering, we would not be approving or allowing the placement of the fence within that easement.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So, Mr. Almeida, I guess I'll ask if you wanted Mr. Lambert to speak, I guess now when we've got the city presenting would be the best time for him to come as well. Board members, are there any other questions that you have for Mr. Almeida? Okay. Any further presentation from the city at this point?
Yeah, I would ask our city engineer, Mr. Todd Lambert, engineering director, to comment.
Okay. Mr. Lambert, if you could state your name, swear and affirm that everything you say will be the truth, and then tell us what additional information we're seeking from you.
Hey, good morning, board members. My name is Todd Lambert, city engineer for the city of Burlington. I swear that everything that I say will be truthful to the best of my knowledge. So as Mr. Romero kind of touched on, multiple issues here. Engineering is involved more so in the utility easement issue. That section of the UDO for fencing, 11D2 of section 4.5 of the UDO, which requires the fence to be installed within an easement. The applicant shall seek the easement owner's consent. This utility easement, just for your background knowledge, is dedicated to allow any public utility as defined by the North Carolina Utility Commissions to use this area for the installation of their lines. That could be gas, power, telephone, TV, internet, water and sewer. And it's not only for existing utilities that currently serve the subdivision, but it's also for any utilities that may want to come in the future. If you have a new service provider that wants to come in, this is the area that they would expect that their lines to be able to be placed in and be encumbered or free of any encumbrances that would hinder that. So both as the city as a public utility and the engineering department that oversees rights of way and utility installations, we do not support or grant or would not grant written permission for the fence to be installed within this utility easement. The utility easement itself is not unique to this property, as every subdivision parcel that is recorded both in Lake McIntosh community and any new subdivision around the city, a 10-foot utility easement is required and permitted, platted behind the right of way for all new subdivisions. So it's not just unique to this parcel. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have either now or in the future regarding this case.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Board members, are there any questions for Mr. Almeida or Mr. Lambert?
Question,
Mr. Lewis has a question. Mr. Lewis, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't get unmuted. The host had me muted out, probably for obvious reasons. Question. In this current utility easement, are there any utilities located in it now?
Generally speaking, any of the utilities that are out there now would be located within this utility easement. So that would include power, Time Warner Cable or Spectrum, and AT&T, along with Piedmont Natural Gas could have some, although they tend to stay closer to the right of way than in the utility easement.
That's not my question, Mr. Lambert. My question is, are there any utilities currently located in this specific utility easement at this particular location?
As far as the city knows, yes. We did not do an actual location or get as-built maps surveyed from utility companies. But yes, the existing utilities that are serving the neighborhood would be located in this utility easement.
Mr. Grant, did I see that you had a question as well?
yes, this fence located as they are proposed, if they put a gate at the location of this right of way, would that, what would be the city's position on that?
There are two easements that this line the fence line is proposed to be within. The utility easement, the fence is proposed to be running parallel and within the easement for the length of the easement. That is the one that the engineering department opposes. The fence that crosses the storm drain easement, that is the one that they are crossing close to perpendicular and proposing a gate. The engineering department does not oppose a perpendicular crossing. We only oppose the parallel length of line installation with the utility easement. So on the screen, as you see, the crossing, and I'll try to annotate and draw here, the crossing of this storm drain easement would be permissible. The ones that we are opposing is where they are within this section of the utility easement running parallel with that easement there.
I have a question for Mr. Lambert, if I can.
Who was speaking?
Randy Herman, attorney for the applicant.
I'm sorry, Mr. Herman, we don't allow cross-examination. The questions come from the board. Mr. Lambert, how far into the easement is the fence being proposed?
As I recall from our pre-application meeting, it was around 6 feet into the easement. Although the line that they have submitted, as you see on your screen now, was not annotated as to how far it is within the easement.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Olmedo or Mr. Lambert? Thank you, gentlemen. We may come back to you with additional questions as we go forward. Who is going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant?
Vice Chairman Gee, if I may.
Sorry, it's just Mr. G.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Mr. G, I'd like to bring forward Chief Code Enforcement Officer Chris Marland to just give some background to this property.
Okay, Mr. Marlin, if you would state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah, Chris Marlin, Chief Code Enforcement Officer, City of Burlington. I swear everything I say to be the truth to the best of my knowledge. As far as background on the property goes, Officer Jeff McClintock noticed the construction in progress and approached property owners to start an enforcement case for work without permit. I think here, one thing that the board needs to consider when asking for the variance of the fence height. I understand that you're also looking at the variance of the location of the fence. I think what you need to be aware of is I'm not sure that you can give them a variance for the location of the fence due to the fact that in the ordinance an easement agreement is required. I don't think you can vary that because we're not the only owners of the easement. So you're kind of answering that question for all the owners of the easement. And I don't know if you can do that. But I think you need to be aware of that before any decision here today is made. What our code actually states is that in order to get the permit, the easement release has to be given by the property owners or the easement owners. That could be, like Mr. Lambert said, that could be Duke Power, that could be Bell South or AT&T, Spectrum Cable, but we don't have that here today. We don't have representation of that here today. So please be mindful when making that decision. And that's kind of what I wanted to get on record here. Also, as far as the height of the fence goes, Mr. G, I think you sort of had a question earlier about the 4 foot and the actual variance that's looked for today. So yeah, it would be a 1 foot variance to the height requirement because it would be required to be 4 feet within that distance along that side street. He's got a 5 foot fence, so you're looking at a 1 foot fence height variance. Is what you guys are looking at here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marlin. Are there any questions from Mr. Marlin? Okay. If someone representing or the applicant would let us know that they're going to present their case, and is that going to be you, Mr. Hernandez, or you, Mr. Herman?
I'm going to present the case and I'll call Mr. Hernandez as a witness.
Okay, that's fine. If you could state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth.
Randy Herman, attorney from the law firm of BA Folk, representing Mr. Hernandez, and I swear that all the testimony that I give will be the truth to the best of my knowledge. Let me give a quick overview real quick, and then we'll get Mr. Hernandez in here to give the actual testimony. the as the city has said, we're basically looking at two separate issues here. So one issue is the height / the location of the fence. So as Mr. Almeida showed on the ordinance, there are basically two categories of fence that would be allowed. So a 6-foot fence is allowed anywhere else on the lot, or a 4-foot fence between the side setback and the property line, where the property line is adjacent to the right of way. So I think it's equally permissible to look at this either as a 1-foot height variance or as a approximately 4.5 foot location variance. Because if the location of the fence were moved over a little bit less than 5 feet to the where the setback line is, it would be allowed to be at the height that it is, or otherwise, if it were 1 foot lower, it would be allowed to be at the location that it is. So either way of looking at it, I think makes an equal amount of sense, whether you want to consider it a height variance or a location variance. And I think we have to separate that from the issue of the fence being located in the utility easement. The staff has testified that they don't support having the fence located where it is, but if it weren't for the utility easement, by right, the applicant could make the fence 1 foot lower and have every right to put it in the place where it is under the ordinance. So when we look at the question of the utility easement, the city has testified that in order for the fence to be placed where it is in the utility easement, the property owner would need to get approval from the easement owner, but they haven't been able to identify who the easement owner is. They've listed, any number of not only current utilities, but future utilities that might be located there. Utilities that we don't even know exist yet. And we would submit that if that is the burden, then in practice, it is impossible for the property owner to actually get approval from every possible current and future utility owner that might be located at any point in the future in that utility easement, in which case the requirement that they get approval from the easement owner is actually an impossible requirement that could not possibly be met by any property owner. And therefore that section of the code really is a nullity. What the code actually says is that you just can't put fences in the utility easement, even though that's not what it appears to say. With that being said, I'm going to call Mr. Hernandez to testify. And so if we can get him unmuted, I'm going to ask him some questions.
Mr. Hernandez, if you would please state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth.
Daniel Hernandez, property 478 Sapphire Road. I swear that everything I say will be truthful to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hernandez, how long have you owned this property?
11 months.
And at what point did you decide to put up a fence?
Back in October of 2020.
So when you decide to do that, how did you decide to locate the fence where you wanted to put it?
Ultimately, I wanted to maximize the yard size. So in terms of where it was located, we tried to push it as far to the property line as possible.
All right. Let me bring up, if I can share my screen real quick, I'm going to show you a couple of documents. Am I allowed to do that? Can I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
You can. Yeah.
I'm trying to find that button then. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So let's start with this one. Can you see that?
Yes.
Should be a view of the, okay. So we are looking at a plot plan of the lot, is that correct?
Yes.
And is this an accurate representation of where you intend to place the fence?
Yes, specifically street side, it is within the easement. As someone stated earlier, there is no actual representation of the distance from the property line. So I would say that that's probably an inaccurate representation. And as submitted in pictures for the variance request, the distance from the property line to the fence is 3 feet total.
All right, let's go to that then real quick. There we go. Okay, I think that's the one I want. So. All right, so I'm showing a picture, and this is a picture coming out of the city's set of documents that were submitted for this case. And so we should be looking at a picture of the grass. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you identify what's being shown in this picture?
So I'm standing at the 10-foot setback, and I have a tape measure showing the distance from where the setback is to where the fence is currently at. Beyond the fence is that 3 feet that I was speaking to the property line.
All right. And what's the distance shown on that picture as far as the distance from the fence to the setback?
It's roughly 7 feet. I don't know that off the top of my head, and I can't read it, but it's right around 7 feet.
So that's on the outside of the fence, from the fence to the property line. Is that
No,
right?
no. That,
Oh, is that on the inside of the fence?
Yes, sir. It's from the fence towards the house. So
To the
essentially-
house or to the setback?
Well, to the setback house, they're both in the same direction. So essentially, to comply with the 10-foot setback, I would have to move the fence from this picture in its current location to the bottom of the picture towards the setback.
All right, so about 73 inches, it looks like, on that.
So 5 feet.
All right. And can you identify what's shown in this picture?
That's just an side angle of the picture, previous picture we looked at. Essentially, I thought I had it marked, but if you're looking at the pieces of the fence, the far left one where the corner meets, that's essentially the setback, the 10-foot setback. So that again is essentially the same picture before. I'd have to move the fence from the left where it currently is all the way over to that location.
Yeah, so basically that pile of white debris, the edge of that is about where the setback is.
That would become my side yard, yes.
And so if the fence were required to be moved to that location, how wide would the fenced side yard be?
It's just over 2, maybe 3 feet, 2.5 feet.
Right. Let's see. All right, so let's go to these pictures here. What is this picture showing?
That's just showing the distance of the fence from the property line in its current state. And then just in case there was any right-of-way questions, I also took a couple of pictures showing that even with the 5-foot fence, there's no obstruction to any street signs or any any blocking of traffic visibility as well.
And just for the record, are all these pictures that you took?
Yes, I took every one of these pictures.
Okay. Let's go to this document. Can you identify what this document is?
Yes, sir. As Mr. Marlin said, it was that they are not the only utility owner. I, through many questions, did not realize that the city was actually a utility owner. After doing a lot of research, what I was able to find out that in that utility, there's currently only one company that provides services in that utility, which is Duke Energy. And after speaking to them, they have provided the authorization of encroachment to put the fence on that utility easement because they do not have any issues with it at this time.
And again, that's the only utility as far as you can figure out that's actually located in that easement.
Yeah, so I've also reached out to Piedmont Natural Gas, and they actually do not have any utilities in that easement. They run across the easement that sits in the front of the property. And then I reached out to Spectrum, and Spectrum did not utilize that utility easement either. They went across the property.
Across the front.
Yes, they went around the front.
All right. Can you just tell the board briefly why it would be a hardship for you if you had to locate the fence, relocate it to where the setback line actually is?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think there's a safety issue. I'm sorry, did you ask about the location or the height?
Let's talk about the location first.
Okay, location. So that the hardship that creates is obviously property value. By moving the fence to within that setback and losing roughly 600 square feet of side yard, at that point, that land or that side yard becomes, a lot smaller, thus creating less value towards the property. Something that was not disclosed, during the purchase of the home. And I think that's it. Really, just at that point, you're losing 600 square feet of usable property space.
Yeah, and in your opinion, if you had to move it over and have about a 2 to 3 foot side yard, would that be a usable yard?
Absolutely not. At that point, it'd almost be pointless to come off of that, and it would more likely just have to come off the corner of the house. It'd be difficult to even maintain the 2 feet wide. You couldn't fit a lawnmower through there. So at that point, I'm going to incur difficulties maintaining that 2 foot sliver of side yard.
I guess let's talk about the height, although I think the city's position probably would be that even if it were 4 foot, they wouldn't allow it because of the utility easement. But if you can just talk briefly about what would be the difficulty in making it a 4 foot high fence.
Can you say that statement one more time?
Yeah, can you explain why it would be a hardship for you if you were to change it to a 4 foot high fence on that side?
At that point, so I do have the utility easement, storm drain easement that runs across the property. There is obviously cement pad with a storm drain manhole cover, excuse me, and that poses a safety risk to anyone in the neighborhood. And if someone were to get hurt, that's technically city property, but I become liable as a property owner. At 4 feet tall of a fence, you're not really deterring anybody who is determined to get in there. I have a 3-year-old son who can scale a 4 foot fence. And so at 5 feet, it's a little bit safer to protect from, to protect myself from, outside interference, especially as children get older. And let's say someone gets to an age where they can scale a 5 foot fence, they're also a little more understanding of personal property and the fact that that shouldn't be done. So it's really for small children. That storm drain through the sides is accessible. And it can propose a very dangerous situation for somebody, ultimately leaving me at fault for it because it is my property.
And just for clarification, this image that I'm showing here, is that an image of the storm drain that you're talking about?
Correct.
And this one here as well.
Yep, that's the same thing.
Right. Okay. All right. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, you did state that even at 4, it kind of threw me off for a second. I want to make sure I understood it, that even at 4 feet, it wouldn't be allowed within the utility easement. Was that
Yeah, I think we can ask the city that, but it just, my impression from the city's testimony is that they probably would not be supportive of the fence, even if it were 4 feet tall because of the location. I think we can let them chime in on that if they want.
Yeah, just for a point of clarification, Mr. Herman and Mr. G, the applicants would have an opportunity for cross-examination of city's testimony. I just want to make sure that we allow that opportunity. You can ask that when you're done with your presentation, Mr. Herman.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add, Mr. Hernandez?
Not at this time.
Okay. Let me call real quick Ryan Spadaccini.
Sorry, Mr. Herman, who are we calling?
Ryan Spadaccini.
Okay, I will promote Ryan to panelist. And Ryan, you are unmuted.
This is Ryan Spadaccini. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you state your and yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Spadaccini, if you could just state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth.
Yes, my name is Ryan Spadaccini. I am the president of the board of directors for the McIntosh on the Lake community, which Mr. Hernandez lives within. And I'm also the chair of the architectural review committee, which approves external improvements to property within the McIntosh on the Lake community. And I do swear that everything I say to be truthful to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Mr. Spadaccini, can you did you review and approve Mr. Hernandez's application for a fence?
Yes.
And can you tell us what's involved in that approval process?
Sure. So any resident within the community with any external improvement needs to submit a architectural review committee form application, and it requires a detailed description of what they're doing, typically a plot map or a survey showing what they're doing, along with signatures of neighbors. That process is submitted electronically. There is a board of 5 people that vote on it or give feedback or comments. And through that process, more information sometimes is required. And then we either approve or deny or approve with certain conditions.
And in this case, did you approve it or approve it with conditions?
Originally, it was denied because Mr. Hernandez had wanted to put it right on the sidewalk, which is not something that the HOA would approve I'm sorry, the ARC or Architectural Review Committee would approve for any resident of the community. So it was suggested that he move it back from there. He reapplied, and initially we did approve it with conditions that it was not placed in the easement. However, under our own legal counsel yesterday, that is not a position that the ARC should have made or could make in the future. That would be a matter of something between the resident of any resident within the community and the city to deal with. So as far as the fence looks aesthetically and its location, it is very similar to other homes with dozens, if not hundreds of other homes within the community. And if he were to resubmit it, we would approve it unconditional with no conditions. Again, it is not our position to approve or disapprove placement of a fence or any shed per se in an easement that is not between us and the resident, that is between the resident and the city.
To your knowledge, are there other fences located in this neighborhood that are less than 10 feet away from right away?
Yes.
And that are, over 4 feet tall?
Yes.
So this is a common sort of fence that's located in that neighborhood?
Correct.
All right, that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it.
All right. That's all the witnesses I have. If I can briefly close, I want to, well, let me call Todd Lambert real quick. I have a couple of cross-examination questions. So Mr. Lambert, you testified that in order to be able to place a fence in this easement, the property owner would need to get approval from the easement owner. In your opinion, who is the easement owner for this easement?
The easement owner is all public utilities as defined by the North Carolina Utility Commission.
So in order to be able to place a fence in the easement, the property owner would need to get approval from every utility located in the state of North Carolina?
As it's written in the ordinance, any easement requires the owner to give written permission. For a utility easement, that could be all utility companies.
All right. Let me ask you this. If the fence were 4 feet tall instead of 5 feet tall, would the city's opinion be any different as to whether or not it could be located where it is?
No.
All right. That's all the questions I have. If I can, I'm going to finish up real quick by addressing the elements of what is required to be proven in order to show a variance. I just want to address those issues. So there are 4 elements that the applicant has to prove in order to be able to be approved for variance. First is that an unnecessary hardship would result from strict interpretation of the ordinance. So in this case, as I said, you can look at it either as reducing the height of the fence or relocating the fence in order to comply with the strict terms of the ordinance. This is putting aside the utility issue for a moment and just talking about the height and location of the fence. The property owner could comply either by lowering the height of the fence or by relocating the fence to the setback line and keeping it at the same height. Property owner has testified that if the fence were relocated to the setback line, that would be a hardship because it would result in a side yard that is too small to be practical, and also that would be too narrow to be practically maintained. Because it's not even wide enough to run a lawnmower down. Also, that if the height of the fence were changed to 4 feet tall, that would create a hardship because it would create possible liability for him in not being able to keep children out when there is a storm drainage concrete pipe and drainage hole that's located on the property that might create liability for him if a child was injured there. The second element for a variance is that the conditions creating the hardship be particular to the property. So in this case, the hardship results from the fact that the lot is quite narrow. It's a side lot. And also the location placement of the house on the lot. Where the house is placed on the lot, you can see from the plot plan, is quite close to the setback on the side, which is what creates this very narrow side yard if the fence were placed on the setback line or farther into the lot than the setback line. So that again is specific to the size, the width, and shape of the lot, and also the placement of the house on the lot, both of which are particular to the property. And also goes towards the third element, that the hardship not be caused by the property owner. So again, the size, shape, and the location of the house, all are issues that were created by the home builder and the developer of the neighborhood, all of which took place prior to the property owner purchasing the property. and finally, the granting of the variance must comply with the intent of the ordinance and not create any problems for any other property owners. So we've heard testimony from the HOA that there are many lots in this subdivision that have similar fences. So the property owner is not asking for anything different than what other homes in the neighborhood have. He's asking for something that's very similar to what other homes in the neighborhood have. He's not asking for any kind of special approval that would be different from any of the other homes. And as far as public safety, we have seen from the pictures that the applicant presented that the fence as located doesn't create any obstruction of street signs. It doesn't obstruct the view of the right of way. So it's not creating any kind of a public safety issue where drivers would be negatively impacted going around that corner or anything like that. Finally, as to the issue as it relates to the utility easement, the town's position is that in order to get approval for this location of this fence, the property owner would need to get approval from every utility that exists or might exist in the state of North Carolina. And we would just, we would present that that is an impossible burden. The property owner has gotten approval from the only utility that is actually has any actual facilities located in the easement. We've presented that approval to you. He's contacted other utilities that at least practically might have facilities located in this easement, and they have stated that they're not actually using the easement. And then the only other utility that has actually said no is the town itself. And the town's resistance seems to be based on the potential impact to other utilities, because again, the town isn't actually using this easement either. So we would testify, or we would submit that we have met the burden of getting the approval of the utility owners to the extent that is practical, and to hold the property owner to a higher burden is unreasonable. That's all I have, and we look forward to your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Members of the board, are there any questions for Mr. Herman, Mr. Hernandez, or Mr. Spadassini? Okay.
I have a question for Todd Lambert and Chris.
Okay, Mr. Grant, go right ahead.
Okay, Mr. Lambert, are you knowledgeable of any other permits for fences involved in this area that have faced such conditions as this?
I'm not aware of any applications or fence permits that have requested to be in the utility easement, as the city would always not approve a request for a fence running parallel and within the easement.
Mr. Marley, have you been involved in any such applications in the past?
Mr. Grant, looks like Chris Marlin was disconnected from the call. Oh, is he coming back? There he is. Thank you.
Say that again, please, Mr. Grant.
Have you been involved in any similar zoning applications for fences, et cetera, in the area such as this?
As far as how many fence permits have been submitted, I can't answer that. We don't handle fence permits here, but I can tell you we have several violation enforcement cases in the McIntosh area for this same issue. Yes. I would also actually, sorry, Mr. G, I'll wait till board questions are done, but I have a question for cross-examination.
I'll follow up on your response, Mr. Marlin. So you said there are other cases. Are those pending, or have they been resolved, or are they already handled?
It's possible you will see more cases of this type for this same issue in the future. We're still dealing with those cases right now.
Question for Mr. Spatacini.
Yes, Mr. Grant.
When your committees review the residents' applications for items like this, do y'all take in consideration the utilities, et cetera?
Typically, we don't. Again, under legal counsel, from our own counsel, we were advised yesterday that it is not the HOA's position to approve or disapprove placement based on easements, such as utility easements, and that is something that the city and the resident should deal with directly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all, Mr. G.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing as we have no further questions for the applicant, I'd like to open this up to the public for any additional input. Ms. Lawson, is there anyone from the public that you're aware of that is trying to speak?
Yes, it looks like Casey Embry has their hand raised, so I'm going to allow them to speak.
Thank you.
Mr. Embry, if you could state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth.
My name is Casey Embry, and I swear and affirm that everything I say is the truth to the best of my knowledge. I'm sorry, Mr. Grant, you had asked the question if there was a similar instance that anyone knew of. My property is almost identical to Mr. Hernandez's. And like Mr. Hernandez, I have a fence already installed. Was unaware that a permit was required, and in pursuing legal action against our subcontractors that installed it. However, the situation is very similar. I have a utility easement on a corner lot. I have a drainage easement. I have the open storm drain in my backyard. So yes, it's quite prevalent throughout McIntosh as a community. Anyone with corner lots will be in this position.
Thank you, Mr. Embry. Does anyone else have a question for, or does anyone have a question for Mr. Embry? Okay. Ms. Lawson, is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak?
Yes, it looks like Eli Oaklish also has their hand raised, so I will allow them to speak as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mr.
Yes.
Oaklish, if you could state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth to the best of your knowledge.
Absolutely. My name is Eli Oaklish. Everything I say is going to be truthful to the best of my knowledge. And I'm 410 Sapphire, just up the road. Short and sweet to the point. All I want to say is I have absolutely no problem with my neighbor building his fence as originally intended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public, Ms. Lawson?
Let's see, Casey Embry looks like the hand was raised again. Let me also ask if anyone else listed in the attendee list would like to speak on this matter, please raise your hand. Or you can also use the call-in number that was provided. I'll go ahead and ask Casey you're able to speak. Oops. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. My wife nudged me when I ended my last comment. Where we're located, just down from Mr. Hernandez. So there is the lot directly across the street from the front of his house, and then our house is the next one in line. In our area alone, I know we have about 16 children under the age of 4 just in our immediate vicinity. So the safety issue that Mr. Hernandez brought up is very prevalent with us as well. we would never want to see a child get hurt just due to negligence, basically. So again, I totally support Mr. Hernandez's fence placement as well as the height of 5 feet.
Okay, thank you, Raymond.
Sure.
Mr. G, when we get a chance, Chief Code Enforcement Officer Marlin has a cross-examination question as well.
Okay, are there any other questions from the board? All right, Mr. Marlin.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, Chris Marlin, Chief Code Enforcement Officer. Just a couple of statements for the board to consider and a question for Mr. Spadaccini. Board, please be mindful. Again, I know I mentioned it earlier, but this was a case that was started proactively by our code enforcement officer, Officer McClintock, of a fence being installed without a permit. Now, along those lines, I understand that the Hernandezes received HOA approval. And Mr. Spadaccini, a question for you. When doing HOA approval in the documents that you provide to property owners, does it state that a City of Burlington building permit may be required?
This is Ryan Spadaccini. Give me 1 second. It says the approval is contingent upon compliance with the specifications set forth in the approved application. If your change or addition requires a county, city, or state permit, it is responsibility of the homeowner to obtain this before starting construction.
Yeah, so again, I understand he went and received the HOA approval. On the approval, it does state that a permit is required. A lot of this probably could have been avoided if that permit had been gotten prior to.
Sorry.
So I just wanted to make the board aware of that, as we do have, like I said, numerous cases that we are working in the area for the same thing.
About those.
Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Marlin?
Yeah, I've got one. Mr. Marlin, has the city proactively contacted the local fence building community to let them know that these kinds of issues need to be permitted? Seems to me that we could go a long way towards resolving some of this, as most of the fence building community was aware that they got to have a permit to put up a fence within the city limits of Burlington.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lewis. Thank you for the question. Yes, years ago, when the city started really initiating the fence permits, myself and former city employee Joey Lee contacted numerous fence companies throughout the city of Burlington, as well as Home Depot and Lowe's, to really educate them as to what the city's requirements were. We did receive some pushback from local fence companies. And I understand that there's changeover at Home Depot and Lowe's all the time. But to answer your question, yes, we did try to do that. I know Mr. Omido, he can speak more to it, but he has also gotten with the district manager of Lowe's to try to help them, educate them more again on the issue of requiring a fence permit whenever they're selling a fence and giving it to subcontractors, to help them understand the importance of a fence permit. But we have dealt with probably every fence company between here, Greensboro, and High Point within the last 6 or 7 years to educate them on our requirements for the fence permits.
Mr. Hernandez, I have a question. Did you use a local fencing contractor for this project, or did you do it on your own?
So we purchased the fence through Lowe's, who automatically assigns their own subcontractor to do the installation. I get, Mr. Moreland's statement that it is ultimately my responsibility for the permit. I would just like to add that contractually with Lowe's, the sale price of the fence includes a permit, and contractually their installer is required to get the permit. So I'm not entirely sure how that falls on my shoulders, other than just not knowing that they didn't get the permit.
So just to clarify, because you had a contractor involved, you worked with the presumption that all permits necessary had been obtained before he started constructing the fence.
No, so I was unaware of the fence rule or of the permit requirement altogether. At that point, the fence was partially erected, and then it was after that we were asked to stop in the middle of building that fence that it was discovered that Lowe's in the contract included the sale price of a permit and was required to obtain the permit. So I hope that answers your question.
Maybe I can rephrase the question. Since you contracted this fence through Lowe's, did you assume that if a permit was required, they were going to obtain that permit before constructing the fence?
The assumption was yes, it was going to be done.
Thank you. Mr. Olmedo, Mr. Marlin, or Mr. Lambert, if we were to approve the variance, it's just make sure I understand correctly. It does not eliminate the easement. So if Duke Power, Piedmont Gas, Spectrum had an issue there, the property owner, if he builds this fence, is doing so at his own peril if they decide that they need to get into that easement to do a repair or add a line. Is that correct?
I would like to, Mr. Lambert, if you'd like to respond to that, and I can throw in some extra thoughts there if you'd like.
Yes, I would say that would be the responsibility, and even per the UDO for the section of fence requirements in the easements. So under case D of the fence requirements, item number 2, easements, A is where it talks to the requirement of getting the owner's permission. B, also under that same section of the ordinance, says the landlord is to remain solely responsible for repair or replacement within a required easement if damaged during maintenance or construction activities when the easement by the easement owner or their agent. This would also could be the case that a future utility company could come in and require the fence to be moved altogether, even if the board was to so grant a variance from requiring written approval prior to placement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lambert.
And Mr. G, if I may add to that, when planning reviews these, we are proactively seeking, we're informing property owners to solicit approval from easement providers, utility providers, and the city being one of those, we are internally routing these requests to the city engineering office also.
If I may, can we ask Mr. Hernandez whether he understands that liability?
Sure.
Mr. Hernandez, do you understand that even if this variance is approved, that you are still ultimately responsible to the utilities if there's an issue with the easement? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I do understand ultimately in my seeking of approval from the companies that have utilities in the easement now, one thing that was very common amongst that conversation with Spectrum, Duke, and Piedmont was that because there is a 3-foot gap between the property line and the fence, they make every effort, and that the 3 feet is big enough for them to potentially not even need to come into the other side of the fence on the property to utilize the remaining space of the easement. It does seem as if the city is the only one that has this notion that like the whole 10 feet is needed. And that was consistent with my 3 conversations. That the 3 feet that's currently there is enough room, and that the need to dig up a fence, remove a fence or anything like that is probably not necessary.
Mr. Hernandez, is the fence completed or is it just this section of the fence that's completed?
So street side, it's about 60% completed up to the drive gate. There is nothing that runs across the back of the property. And then the full left side of my house opposite of the street is complete. That is a shared fence with my next door neighbor, and their permit was approved. Therefore, the full left side of the fence has been installed. So it's about 3/4 complete right now.
Members of the board, is there any other questions for the city or the applicant?
Sorry, Mr. G, if I may, can we get a confirmation from our city engineer, or if that would be appropriate this time, if the fence variance were approved, what the city engineering office's stance would be as far as that encroachment into the utility easement?
You can have anyone you'd like to share. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're
just
asking to get in.
Sorry, Mr. G, for the city engineering office, if the variance were approved in its current location, what would the city engineering's office, what would your decision be to allow or not allow the fences placement within the utility easement?
Well, hey, board, as I understand it, if the board so chooses to grant a variance to the requirement of the easement owners giving written permission, and if that was the variance that was granted, then they could place the fence within the easement without written permission from the utility easement owners, and the fence could be there. The long-term ramifications would be if particularly a new utility company wanted to be within that easement, and the only place left that they could install a line within that easement and be spaced properly from the utility commissions could realistically be on the inside of the fence, and that such utility company could require the fence to be removed altogether. But again, if the board granted the variance for not requiring easements owners written permission, then the fence would be allowed to be within the easement. They would still be responsible for maintenance of the fence or removal of the fence should that be demanded by a future utility easement occupant.
Any questions for Mr. Lambert? All right, seeing that there are no further questions, I'd like to close this to conversation among the board. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts after hearing the testimony?
I think we need to grant it. I mean, the only utility in it is Duke. They gave permission.
Mr. Giles, in hearing, I mean, we do have the good fortune of having an attorney on the board. With the testimony that's been presented regarding having permission from all utility owners, is that a viable alternative for a property owner?
I don't know that it is. After listening to everything, I think if we approve it, we're going to be opening up the floodgates and we're going to have more and more of these coming through. And I don't know that that's a position we necessarily want to place ourselves in. I mean, the easements are put there for a reason. And it's for the utility companies. It's not to restrict people to, as far as where they can place their fences in. I mean, it works that way, but the easements are put there for the utility companies. And I don't know that we want to be getting in a situation where we're having to undo easements all the time.
I don't think we're undoing an easement, Bob. I just think that under the circumstances, the homeowner has gotten permission from the only utility that's in the easement. I get easements. I totally understand that. I got them running across my yard too. You know, I got a power easement across the back, and I know that you don't go anywhere near that thing without contacting ULOCO to find out where they are. Even if you're going to plant a bush in the backyard, I have to do that. I get it. But in this particular case, I think the homeowner has done any and everything they can do to take care of this issue. And I hate that that it's a corner lot, but we've got utility easements that will never be used. But that's just a requirement of our development ordinance and where builders deal with these kinds of things. So yeah, we may open the floodgate, but hey, that's the way it is, man. This guy's a citizen and a resident of the city of Burlington, and he's trying to do, a good thing in protecting his children. The neighborhood's good with it. I don't see the problem.
I do know that, one thing that we are not allowed to consider is financial implications as a hardship. And so I know that was mentioned initially. Some of the valuation of the property of the fence had to be relocated, and we're not supposed to consider financial implications in the decision process as a hardship. I do think that there are demonstrated public safety issues that have been brought to light through the testimony, with the drainage, I guess the catch basin in the backyard, trying to keep children out. I understand the need for the fence. I'm not 100% certain that the hardship was created by the applicant. I don't necessarily agree with, the fact that, they bought the house as it was, created the hardship, because, that is what it is. I mean, you know that when you buy the house. I do believe that, when you contract with someone to install a fence for you, and the assumption based on the money exchanged is that all proper permits are going to be obtained, that you've kind of met your burden. Initially I'm trying to think, did these guys start the fence trying to circumvent the city? I don't think that's the case. I think that they contracted through Lowe's and worked on the presumption that that they were in compliance, especially because they'd already been before the architectural committee and the HOA board, which I believe are in tune with what's going on. So I think that, you could argue that the testimony does meet the two first requirements. And actually even the third, it wasn't a result of the applicant. I also get what the city's hard stance on this is they don't want to open the gates on this thing with setting a precedent and having multiple other property owners even in this particular neighborhood, building fences that are within the easement, just to preserve future rights and opportunities in the easement. But I'm kind of talking all over the place, and I apologize for that. But at the same time, even if we grant the variance, if Piedmont Gas comes in there or the city comes in and says we want to run a water line, they can push that fence over and not think twice about it, because it's still in the easement. Whether we say you can put it there or not, the easement prevails. So those are my thoughts.
I would feel like we were opening the floodgates on this too, Mr. Giles. The easements are there for a purpose.
I'm sorry, Mr. Grant, I lost you there.
I say I would agree with Mr. Giles that these easements were placed with a purpose there, and I understand Mr. Hernandez's position, but I question if we wouldn't open the floodgates also.
Yeah, it put us in a position of having to cooperate with one another. Gee, that's terrible.
Now, and again, when we get the financial implications, again, there is a cost to removing this fence or relocating it. I would think that the applicant would have recourse against the contractor in that case for starting the project without the proper permits in place. But is there any further discussion? It sounds like I won't say that we're split evenly, but it sounds like we're going to have a problem getting a unanimous consent on this. So if there's no further discussion, I'd like to ask someone to make a motion either for or against granting the variance.
I make a motion that we approve the variance based on the 4 conditions of approval of the variance. In that if it's the unnecessary hardship by the strict enforcement of the variance in regard to the safety issue, liability issue, particularly involving the drainage easement in the rear, the conditions creating the hardship are specific to this particular property, because it does have 2 areas of, well, actually probably 3 areas of right of way or easements through it. The hardship was not caused by the property owner at all. It's evident by the home builders and the developers in this location. And it obviously does not create a problem for others, a hardship for other adjoining homeowners or within the community.
All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed? Mr. Giles and Mr. Grant vote in opposition. Mr. Hernandez, your request for a variance has been denied. And again, you can appeal any decisions of this board to Superior Court. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. The next item that we have on the agenda is item number 4. The applicant is Mr. Tom Pate. The location is 443, 445, and 447 Lane Street. Is Mr. Pate still with us?
Yes, I do see him on, Mr. G.
Right. Mr. Olmedo, are you going to present the case for the city on this as well?
I can definitely have something prepared for you all. You just let me share my screen here. Good morning, Vice Chairman, members of the board. My name is Conrad Olmedo, Planning Manager for the City of Burlington. I swear that everything I say to the best of my knowledge will be the truth. The property in question for this morning's request is addressed as 443, 445, and 447 Lane Street, identified as Alamance County parcel identification number 136226. The request is to allow a 14-foot wide mobile home where a minimum width of 16 feet is required per section 9.2.c.2.a under manufactured or mobile homes. Staff's position is to support the UDO's requirement to maintain a 16-foot wide mobile home. Here's a brief sketch of the properties in question and the placement of this mobile home. There are 3 lots that the applicant will be, there are 3 mobile home lots that they will be placing this one mobile home lot on, but I'm sure Mr. Pate will be able to provide further clarification as needed. I'm available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Almeida? Okay, thank you. Seeing no questions, if the applicant would come forward and state their name and swear or affirm that everything they say will be the truth. Mr. Pate, I think you may be on mute.
He has asked to, I have unmuted him or asked to unmute. He should be able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank the citizens on this board for with their willingness to serve the community, and appreciate the opportunity to meet with you this morning.
Mr. Pate, if you would, if you could just state your name and swear or affirm that everything you're going to tell us will be the truth.
Will do. My name is William Thomas Pate, and I swear that the information that I give this morning is truthful.
Thank you.
I have owned this mobile home park since 1979, and probably in the mid 80s, I expanded it. When I bought it, there was some vacant land and I expanded it. The mobile home park is all on city streets. Every lot has their separate water, sewer, electric meter. And what I am doing or wanting to do here is mobile homes have gotten bigger over the years. So I have recombined existing lots to facilitate larger homes over the years. And that's what I'm wanting to do now, actually using 3 existing lots, which I could search and put I guess a smaller mobile home on, but for aesthetics and not to be so crowded, functionality, we choose not to do that. And over the years, currently, I own no mobile homes within this mobile home park. They are 100% owner occupied, but occasionally over the years, I have purchased homes off-site, moved them in, remodeled them, and sometimes I've rented them for a short period of time. Most of the time, the tenants would end up buying the home, or I have marketed the home and sold them. Affordable housing, I think, is a important issue that needs to be considered here. I've actually have people contacting me all the time wanting to know if we have any mobile homes available in there. And I think most of you probably saw a front page article in the last week's Times News addressing lack of affordable housing in Burlington. And I think the new UDO probably is written by folks that maybe doesn't really understand how a mobile home park works. I think considering this as a non-conforming use, we've got a mobile home park duly permitted, existing, and we want to move a mobile home in there. And the rules have changed, which I think a lot of the mobile home park owners are unaware of. I was unaware of it. As long, I called the planning department just to make sure that the setbacks haven't changed, because I hadn't put one in probably 2 years, and found out this. But I don't think when you're putting a mobile home within a mobile home park that it causes any different factors affecting adjoining property owners or having any kind of negative effect on the neighborhood. And I think that the fact that it's 14 feet or 16 feet or 12 feet is a little bit arbitrary. And I would appreciate your consideration to allow a variance to do that. And I intend, because I've got a couple of other vacant lots that I would like to do this with. And I'm probably going to continue to address this issue so other park owners will not be confronted with it in the future. I don't know if it was the intent of the change to curb the existence of mobile home parks within the city of Burlington zoning jurisdiction or not, but it seems like that is the outcome of considering this as a non-conforming use. I would appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Pate. Are there any questions at this time from the board for Mr. Pate?
Mr. Tate, regarding the size of this mobile home, 14 versus 16, do you currently own or have purchased a 14-foot wide mobile home for this property?
Yes, sir, I have.
Mr. Pate, I'll ask this too. So just to clarify, you are in the process of or have already recombined 3 separate lots to create one lot that this proposed mobile home will be on. Is that correct?
The recombining of the lots does not, to my knowledge, require any action on the city. They're just 3 contiguous lots that will be used to facilitate one home, 3 existing lots.
I understand. Okay. Are there any further questions for Mr. Pate? Okay, Mr. Pate, we may call you for additional questions if you can just hang with us. Mr. Almeida, I have a couple of questions that I hope you can answer for me. What is the purpose of requiring a 16-foot wide versus a 14-foot wide in an existing mobile home park that already has 14-foot wide homes?
I did reach out to our consultant who helped provide some insight, and the intent is to have a newer product that is at a wider size dimensioned for mobile homes. So the newer products are going to be built on with wider footage. So instead of 12, 14, we're going at 16 foot. So that would be the intent, to encourage a newer mobile home products to replace the current existing mobile home stock that we have in the city.
Okay, so is there, there's a lot of places in our ordinance where if there's an existing structure or a mobile home, the applicant or the property owner can replace with what is already there. Is that something that's in the ordinance for mobile homes?
What I'll do is I'll share my screen and I'll provide the ordinance that staff relies on for the replacement of mobile homes. And this section right here is our 9.2C. It's the non-conforming uses. And so we have a time frame also in which the mobile homes can be replaced, but it's not necessarily a like for like. You can replace the structure, but per these parameters under number 2. And that's where the conflict is with the current proposed, the request at hand. So to add on, there's nothing restricting a larger mobile home product, often referred to as a double wide on the property.
Price people are gonna pay to put it on those lots. You know what I'm coming from?
So bear with me, Mr. Almeida. I'm trying to read and comprehend what I'm seeing here.
So the number 2 is manufactured mobile homes. An existing non-conforming manufactured mobile home may be replaced with another non-conforming manufactured home or mobile home, provided the replacement mobile or manufactured home. Then it has these subsections A through D.
I got that. So I guess what I'm going to say there is, so is the ordinance contradictory? Because the first statement there says that the replacement can be with another non-conforming manufactured mobile home. And A is that it's 16 feet or wider, but if it's 16 feet or wider, it's not going to be non-conforming. Is that correct?
I think that I hear where the logic is going in terms of a structure. I do think that the context here would be with the use of a non-conforming mobile home. So if we're looking under the subheader would be non-conforming uses. And if we were to look at a mobile home or a manufactured home as a use, it is no longer permitted in many of our zone districts. I'll go ahead and illustrate that here. If you can bear with me 1 second, I'll do some live modifications. Let's see if, well, it's in our principal use table. So I think the context here is more so along the lines of a use versus a structure.
So is this property no longer conforming as a mobile home park?
It would be considered a non-conforming use for the property.
So even though the whole area around him is mobile home park, these lots are considered non-conforming because it sat empty for 60 days or more?
Well, the assumption is that we're within that 60-day period to allow the current whatever was there to be replaced with what the applicant's proposing.
Okay, so what I guess I'm saying is because he's gone more than 60 days, the city's position is that this is no longer a conforming use as a mobile home park?
We're under the presumption that it's recurring within the 60 days. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Okay, so is this a non-conforming use as we sit today?
Correct. The use of the mobile home park And the zone district is high density residential. And that is mobile home, manufactured homes are not considered permitted uses per the UDO at this time. So as a non-conforming use, staff then refers to this section, non-conforming uses, and looking at this specific call out under manufactured or mobile home, staff is then relying on this section to implement the replacement of a mobile home or manufactured home.
Okay, so we're saying that within this 60-day window that he's removed a mobile home, he's removed a mobile home from the property that the proposed mobile home is going on. That
Yes, sir.
it is non-conforming as a mobile home park, even though all these mobile homes are around him and it's been there since 1979.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, may I speak to that issue?
Mr. Pate, yes, you may.
I just don't, it just seems unreasonable to me that the mobile home park is considered a non-conforming use. It was mobile home parks were allowed by special use permit. You had to do your engineering. It had to go before planning and zoning. It had to be approved by city council. The original part, when I bought it in 1979, went through that process. I personally had to go through that same process along the mid-'80s when I expanded the mobile home park. I personally, as the landowner, paid to install this water, city sewer, the meters, build a city street to the city's specification, was approved before I could use it. So I don't understand why it's a non-conforming use when it was approved by special use permit, when it was zoned, the old zoning ordinance was R6, which is basically the HDR, high density residential. The land use is the same. And I know it's difficult to do a blanket new zoning code and cover all land uses, but I just think it's unreasonable to say that it's a non-conforming use. It was a mobile home park. It is a mobile home park. And again, I think a 60-day period in there is very arbitrary. And I try to run this. I know some mobile home parks are not managed as well as this one is. Most of the people that are there are been there long term, have very little turnover. There's nobody at the city anymore that knows my record personally, but I have worked with the city over the years. If there's something that needs to be taken care of, they give me a call. The city and I have worked together, like unlicensed cars parked. You know, I'm hands-on. My son Spencer that works with me, we're hands-on in managing this. It has not created any detrimental effects to the neighborhood, criminal activity. We don't have a lot of criminal activity. It's owner occupied, but I don't see why it's a non-conforming use to begin with, other than the way the new UDO is written, making it trying to make it non-conforming. It's a mobile home park. You're replacing one mobile home with another mobile home. So I think the chairman had a pretty good point there.
Thank you, Mr. Pate. Are there any further questions for the applicant or for the city from the board? Seeing that there are no further questions, I'd like to open this
I
up.
got Mike.
Oh, sorry,
I
Mr.
got
Lewis,
one-
go ahead.
I got one quick question. With the advent of the new UDO, Mr. Almedo, does this basically put all the mobile home parks that are located within the jurisdiction of the city as non-conforming?
That's a good question, Mr. Lewis. The city, when we look at a special use permit, we would look at that as a permitted use until that use is discontinued. So that's how we would be approaching existing mobile home parks if they are under operation as a special use permit. As under record, I have not been able to find a special use permit in our record database to demonstrate that this specific mobile home park is operating under a special use permit. As such, we're looking at this as an HDR zone district of classification of the use.
Are you telling me that there are no records within the city council minutes going back to when Mr. Pate had to go through the process when he expanded it that indicates that this was approved?
I think we do have minutes and record. With this, I think I would like to ask the Board of Adjustment to perhaps, because Mr. Pate's testifying that he does have a special use permit on file, I would like to investigate that further into our city council minutes and to determine if there in fact is a special use permit on the record. Because then we would look at this as a special use permitted use versus something that would be applied as in a non-conforming use.
If that was not required when Mr. Pate went through the approval process, if it didn't require a special use permit, isn't he grandfathered because he is approved as a mobile home park?
So if there was no special use permit required, but the zone district changed, then we would be applying this as a grandfathered use, which would then be it's referred to as a non-conforming use.
Okay, so let me ask another question. In the vast majority of the mobile home parks that were within the city limits when they were built, was the traditional width of mobile homes 14 feet?
I'm not a subject matter expert with that. Maybe Chris Marland, our Chief Code Enforcement Officer, can speak to this. If I can bring him in.
Yeah, thanks, Conrad. Board, Chris Marlin, Chief Code Enforcement Officer. When, Mr. Lewis, answer your question, when we were going through the process of creating the UDO, that was looked at. And the history and the information of what we found was most of our mobile home parks were built 60s, 70s, around there. Some of them, amended in the 80s, but at that time, actually the standard width of a single wide was 12 feet. That is no longer the industry standard. Neither is 14 feet, which is where the 16 feet comes from. That is current industry standard of new mobile homes and what is required for them as far as space and everything else versus HUD requirements versus usually city and state requirements. That's where that came from. The use of this as a non-conforming use, if you set aside the special use permit that Mr. Pate's mentioning, prior to the UDO, this was still a non-conforming use. It didn't become a non-conforming use when the UDO was enacted. It was a non-conforming use before that. If there's a special use permit that we can find the details of, as Mr. Olmedo said, then possibly we can look at it that way. But most mobile home parks that we have that do not have the SUP were non-conforming prior to the UDO. They were non-conforming with our old ordinance. So it's not like it just became non-conforming. It's been non-conforming for a while, aside from an SUP. If there's an SUP on file, we can get that. That's a different case.
Mr. Romito, Mr. Marlin, as part of the city's efforts regarding this case, have you guys made an effort to find those records prior to this meeting?
An effort was made to investigate, and that we did not find our records in the mobile home. We have a database of special use permits that go back to the early 80s, if you will, and the search through that database, I did not find a mobile home park, a special use permit approved for this specific property. That being said, I'd be more than happy to look through that again and to inquire with our city clerk. They do have books of, and I can coordinate with Mr. Pate to find out a more specific date that he took this item to city council, because that always helps in our record searching. But my initial investigations in our existing database, I did not find a mobile home park for this particular property.
Thank you. Mr. Pate, I have a question. The mobile home that you're putting on the property, is this larger or smaller than what has been there currently?
Larger. All three mobile homes that were on these three lots were 12-foot wide mobile homes. And 16 may be when Mr. Marley, and I think Mr. Marley, correct me on this, when he says it's the standard industry, I think we're meaning that's for a brand new, if you went to buy a brand new mobile home today. I'm not sure, if all of them are 16, but a lot of them are, I don't know if you can still buy a 14 or a 12 new one or not. I'm not sure. I don't want us to get hung up when I say a special use permit. I just assume that when I built that street, Allie Williams, Carmen, and King did my engineering, and maybe I didn't have, since it was an existing mobile home park, whether it was a non-conforming use or it was special permitted. I didn't go build a city street and run water and sewer without the proper inspections. I mean, that just wouldn't have happened. Don't want us to get hung up on the fact, did that require a special use permit? I mean, I don't remember. I just assumed it did, but it may or it may not. If there's not one on record, it may not have been required since it was contiguous to the existing mobile home park. I hate for us to get, hung up on that issue. I don't think it, whether it was or it wasn't back in the mid 80s, whether the city can find it or not. Again, I didn't just go build a street to spend all that money without the proper engineering and okay from the city. I mean, that's just common sense.
Yeah, Mr. G, to speak to that, yeah, of course, Mr. Pate received, the proper engineering and permits to build the street. At the time, being that the use would have been non-conforming, the city still would have given him the right to build the street to our standards through permitting and engineering, even though the use itself was non-conforming. So yeah, and I'm not questioning the street or anything like that, but as far as the use goes, a non-conforming use still would have been allowed to construct a street with permits to standards. So I'm sure Mr. Pate did get permits and everything was done correctly for the street and the water and everything like that. At the time, the use was probably still non-conforming though.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board for the city or the applicant?
Question for Mr. Pate again, please. Mr. Pate, how long have you had trailers on these three particular lots?
How long has it been?
Yes,
I'm going to say it's been maybe 5 years. My intent in managing this property is not always the bottom line, but to do what's compatible with the neighborhood. I know a lot of other park owners would have rushed to get a unit in there. But I just keep my eyes open, and when I run across a nice unit, I may move it in. My intent is not to stay 100% occupied all the time, and that's why I think with a mobile home park, this 60-day rule is arbitrary also, maybe a little unrealistic if a park owner is trying to manage his park, not just looking at the bottom line, but trying to maintain a nice neighborhood.
when did you remove the three mobile homes from these three lots?
Mr. Grant, it's been a long time ago. I can't remember specifically.
Has it been months or years or?
I would say it's been 5 years.
So the lots have been sitting vacant for a period of, say, 5 years.
That's right. I mow them every week. I keep them up. Right.
And this one mobile home you're speaking of replacing there, you're buying a used mobile home.
That's correct.
Okay. My question right now to the board would be, has a special use permit been issued? That would be a question I would like to have an answer to.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Pate? Are there any other questions for the city at this point? Seeing that we have no further questions, we'll open this up to the public. Ms. Lawson, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this?
I see two people listed in the attendee, and one person just raised their hand with the 919563 number. I'm going to allow that person to speak now. You are unmuted.
It appears that the 919 cell phone is still on mute.
Go ahead if that caller can speak.
Ms. Lawson, it appears that they're still showing a mute on my screen here.
Yep, I am allowing them the ability to speak.
Gotcha.
Do they push *9? Maybe, is that what it is?
Yes, they do have the ability to dial *9 to unmute as well.
All right. The caller, if they can hear us, if you can hit *9 on your phone, it should allow you to unmute and be heard by the board.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm hitting the asked to unmute, but doesn't look like it's changing on their end.
Maybe I call their number. Well, I'll try calling them. Let's see.
It just looks like they just disconnected. Maybe they'll call back in.
Okay.
I missed the last four numbers of that number. Anyone remember? No? Okay.
Sorry. Is there anyone else from the public, Ms. Lawson?
There's a Renee Stewart also listed as an attendee. If you're interested in speaking on this case, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing a hand being raised, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Getting a few seconds here. Doesn't look like they're calling back in. Seeing as there's no public comment, I am going to close this to discussion among the board. Thoughts, folks?
I feel that we should approve it. We've approved these before. This is a mobile home park. He's moving a mobile home into it. It's slightly smaller than what the current usage requirement is or the size requirement is, but we've allowed this before and I think it's a good use and so I support it.
Second.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as testified by the applicant, I mean, the mobile home proposed to be replaced is actually larger than what was there. We don't have square footage on a brand new one versus this proposed used unit, but it is a larger unit. It's consistent with the use of this property over the years, even though I guess technically by our ordinance, this is a non-conforming use. I don't think, Mr. Grant, I know you asked about the special use permit. I think my take on the testimony from the city and the applicant is that there probably is not a special use permit in place, but the park and the development of the park took place in line with all requirements for that development, hooking into water and sewer. So I think the only issue we've got to decide upon is a 14-foot wide home versus a 16-foot wide home. And I would be supportive of granting the variance as well, just because I think it remains in harmony with the other properties in the area.
Mr. G, if I may, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
The due to the testimony from the applicant, it appears that the mobile homes were removed beyond the 60-day requirement. So I would suggest that if the board make a motion, include that technicality.
Before the board makes a motion, I just got notification that the person who is trying to speak is going to be calling back in and would like the opportunity to make some comments. So can we just hold off on that for a minute?
Sure.
And see if we can allow the opportunity for this person to call back in?
Yes, if they come back in, I'll move to reopen for public comment.
Thank you.
Apologize, Mr. G. This is the section that is, I would recommend that the motion letter B in place within 60 days.
Yeah,
for that number.
I hear you, Mr.
All
Elliott.
right, thank you.
We did close to testimony, and I think that the city had ample time to present their case.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I see the caller also looks like were able to join the meeting again. I'm going to go ahead and allow that person to speak if that's all right with you.
Sure. I want to move that we reopen for public comment.
So move.
Okay, caller, I have allowed you to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Okay,
If
thank you.
could-
I'm sorry for the confusion.
No
This
problem.
is Renee Stewart,
Okay,
and
Ms.
I
Stewart-
have
Ms. Stewart,
a
I'm sorry.
lot on 803 Ray Street.
Ms. Stewart,
Yes,
could you, I apologize, could you please state your name and swear or affirm that everything you say will be the truth to the best of your knowledge?
yes, my name is Renee Stewart, and everything that I say will be the truth
Thank
to the
you.
best of my knowledge.
Okay,
So
go
I
ahead.
just wanted, so I just wanted to put on record that I do not agree with moving in a mobile home of 14 feet instead of 16 feet. I think the property area would, you want to update the property. This area is not in the, has not been in the best area of town. So in my opinion, you're trying to keep it that way when you're not going by the guidelines and keeping pursuant to, your guidelines of having a 16-foot mobile home moved in there. The person had, they're over the 60-day limit. It's been vacant for 5 years. And I think putting a mobile, if you're going to put a mobile home there, it should be of updated value to increase the property values around. And also, since it is, I guess they consider it a non-conforming use. So I just wanted to put that on record that I do not agree. I feel like the property owner should abide by the city guidelines. And then also it's going to be an old mobile home. So I don't know whether it's going to be something you got to move in there and then you've got to fix it up. So I feel like you're approving all of this because it is pretty much in the minority part of town. If it was in your area, you live next door, I don't think you would be approving it. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. Payne.
I don't think 2 feet on the width of a mobile home is going to change the area of the neighborhood, the influence the neighborhood in a negative manner. And the mobile home will be renovated. All electrical, plumbing, HVAC, the site will all have to be inspected by the city of Burlington. So it will be completely up to code. It's pretty costly to move a mobile home this day and time. So I wouldn't take the initiative to move one in that would have a negative influence on a long time investment in the neighborhood that I already have. Again, it's it's making affordable housing available to or part of our citizenry that has a shortage of affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Mr. Almeida, since we did open the meeting back up for additional comment, I know you had asked if you could make another point.
Thank you, Mr. Gee. Just a point of clarity, if I think the board would need to modify any request of the width to also include the minimum amount of days that need to take place. It sounds like the property has been vacant for more than the 60 days. So I would just ask that the board in their motion include that as one of their items so we can clear that up on our technical.
Mayor, so it's not vacant. So you can put something on it. That's what that costs.
again, I'm not quite sure I understand. It's a non-conforming use regardless, correct, Ms. Romito?
Yes, sir. So it's a non-conforming use, and I'll share my screen to point to the section. So in the request is to have the 16-foot wide be reduced to a 14-foot, and the second one would be letter B, is in place within 60 days of the removal of a prior non-conforming mobile or manufactured home. And based on testimony from Mr. Pate, those 3 lots no longer have been vacant for more than the 60 days. So just as a technical consideration to adjust this 60 days to a time frame that would best suit Mr. Pate's timing with the removal of the mobile homes on the property.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Pate, so just for clarity's sake, can you tell us how long it's been that this property's been vacant?
Mr. Tate, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Again, I think this has been about 5 years. And, you know, if it gets out in the mobile home park owner community that this is being enforced, because I don't think that very many people are aware of this. But what it's going to do is park owners are going to pull an old junk mobile home in on the lot just to circumvent this regulation. I think the results are going to maybe, I mean, I don't see what is it hurting to improve a situation, to put a time limit on how long that a property owner determines that he wants it to stay vacant, as long as he keeps it mowed and harmonious with the neighborhood.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions of anybody that's spoken before us today? All right, seeing no further questions, I will close for discussion among the board again. I know we started discussion here, and I would just note that whoever makes a motion, if we do move to approve the variance, that the variance would essentially grant placing a 14-foot wide versus a 16-foot wide mobile home on the property that has been vacant for as much as 5.5 years, located at the address that is at the subject of the request. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we grant the variance for the property, the subject property. I don't have the address sitting here in front of me, but
Mr. Lewis, it is 443, 445, and 447 Lane Street.
Okay, grant the variance for 443, 445, and 447 Lane Street to include a 14-foot wide mobile home on the property, and also to address the vacancy period of time that no home has been on this property.
Could you state maybe 5.5 years?
5.5, yeah, 5.5 years. That should cover it.
And Mr. Lewis, if you could just address the findings of fact in your motion.
Yeah, the findings of fact are the strict adherence to this enforcement of the ordinance creates a hardship on the park owner to be able to put a manufactured house on the property. He's actually combining 3 lots to make one to fit the setbacks of a larger home, which is almost, I think it's 14 by 66, which is just shy of 1,000 square feet. The conditions, the hardships, or the conditions creating the hardships are specific to the property, because this is an approved mobile home park within the city of Burlington. The hardship was not caused by the property owner. And I don't see that having to comply with the ordinance does not create a problem for others. It puts a newer model home that's going to be completely remodeled, and should actually increase the value of the properties over there. Other extenuating circumstances we probably don't have to mention is that all the homes that are currently in this park are owner occupied.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
And it's unanimous. Mr. Pate, you've received your variance.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Mr. Olmedo, is there any other business to come before the board this morning?
Thank you, Mr. G. There is no further business.
Then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shut your camera off.